Something massive just changed in this war over the last 24 hours. And if you are relying on surface-level news coverage, you are completely missing the single most consequential strategic development of the entire conflict. There is a moment in every war when the rules change, when an operational boundary is crossed, and when an adversary's structural vulnerability is laid bare for the entire world to see. Something happened in the last 12 hours that the mainstream media is still scrambling to process. But from a strategic and military perspective, the implications are immediate, devastating, and entirely irreversible. My name is Colonel Adrian Thornwell. I commanded United States Army forces in Europe. And throughout my career, I have evaluated military infrastructure, command nodes, and air defense networks across the NATO sphere and far beyond it. When I look at what just took place inside the Russian Federation, I do not see a lucky drone strike. I do not see a temporary tactical setback. I see the catastrophic disruption of the core pillar of Russia's strategic power projection. Stay with me, because by the time I am finished, you will understand why Ukraine's precise multi-axis destruction of the Engels 2 strategic airbase in Saratov Oblast is the one blow Vladimir Putin's war machine simply could not afford to sustain. Let me explain why this is so significant. Engels 2 is not just another military airfield near the border. Located over 500 miles deep inside Russian sovereign territory, right along the banks of the Volga River, Engels 2 is the nervous system of Russia's long-range aviation branch, the Dalnyaya Aviatsiya. This is the premier home base for the 121st Heavy Bomber Aviation Regiment and the 184th Heavy Bomber Aviation Regiment. These are the exact operational units flying the Tu-95 MS Bear H turboprops and the supersonic Tu-160 Blackjack strategic bombers. These aircraft are the absolute backbone of Russia's air-launched cruise missile campaign, responsible for firing heavy Kh-101 and Kh-555 standoff missiles directly against Ukrainian energy grids and urban centers. Engels 2 housed the specialized loading infrastructure, the specialized ground support technicians, the nuclear-capable weapon storage bunkers, and the massive fuel reserves essential for conducting coordinated large-scale airstrikes. By striking at the very heart of Engels 2, Ukraine did not just hit a strip of concrete. They severed the operational limb through which the Kremlin projects heavy aerial firepower. Let me be precise about what happened on the ground and in the airspace above Saratov. This was a masterclass in modern, layered, asymmetric warfare, executed by Ukraine's unmanned systems forces in direct coordination with the Security Service of Ukraine. The SBU, intelligence sources and satellite verification via NASA firms, thermal telemetry and Planet Labs imagery, confirmed that Ukraine launched a synchronized multi-wave deep strike vector using advanced long-range strike munitions, including the indigenous Lyuty strike drone. Russian air defenses in the Saratov region, including layered S-400 Triumph missile batteries and point defense Panzer S-1 units, were completely overwhelmed. Ukraine utilized low-altitude terrain-following flight profiles combined with CRPA-controlled radiation pattern antennas. This effectively nulled out Russian GPS spoofing and heavy electronic warfare jamming from systems like the Krasuka 4. Furthermore, these long-range strike assets were equipped with optical TERCOM navigation terrain-referenced matching that compares real-time optical terrain scans against onboard digital elevation maps. This allowed the autonomous guidance systems to operate with absolute precision, without relying on satellite signals whatsoever. The results were catastrophic for the Russian aerospace forces. The primary strike packages penetrated the perimeter and achieved direct kinetic impacts on the unhardened open aprons and primary maintenance hangars. At least 2 Tu-95 MS strategic bombers suffered catastrophic secondary detonations after high explosive payloads detonated directly adjacent to their fully fueled wings and exposed weapons bays. Fuel bladders, specialized aviation ground power units, and high-value ordnance assembly facilities housing Kh-101 missiles were set ablaze. This produced massive secondary explosions that literally cooked off surrounding support equipment. When you see secondary detonations of that magnitude on thermal satellite imagery, it means the strike did not just hit metal. It hit ammunition storage. It hit operational capability. War is not fought on paper. It is fought with industrial capacity, logistics, and irrecoverable hardware. And this brings us to the macro layer of this campaign: industrial and economic attrition. What most observers fail to grasp is that Russia cannot simply go to a factory floor and build another Tu-95 MS or Tu-160. The industrial production lines for these strategic bombers in Samara and Kazan were dismantled or scaled down decades ago. The Soviet-era tooling is gone. The specialized engineering expertise has aged out. And international sanctions on high-tier CNC machinery, microelectronics, and specialized alloys mean that every strategic bomber frame destroyed or critically damaged is a permanent, non-recoverable loss to the Russian Federation. Russia entered this war with roughly 60 operational Tu-95 MS airframes. When you eliminate or severely damage multiple bombers in a single night, along with their specialized maintenance infrastructure, you are not just degrading today's operational capacity. You are eroding Russia's strategic triad for the next 30 years. Think about what that means in the broader economic context. This strike on Engels 2 does not exist in a vacuum. It is part of a systematic, mathematically calculated campaign targeted at Russia's strategic depth. Simultaneously, Ukraine has been striking primary atmospheric vacuum distillation towers at major Russian oil refineries from Omsk to Kurishi and Saratov. By targeting the complex catalytic reforming and hydrocracking units that Russia cannot easily replace due to Western technological sanctions, Ukraine has triggered severe domestic fuel deficits inside Russia, forcing Moscow to impose export bans on diesel and gasoline. When you hit the energy infrastructure, you dry up the Kremlin's primary revenue engine. When you hit the strategic airbases, you remove the delivery mechanism Putin uses to retaliate. The financial and industrial cost imposed on Moscow is compounding at a rate that far outpaces Russia's wartime economic output. Let me step back and give you the strategic picture as I see it right now. This strike exposes a fatal structural dilemma inside the Russian high command. Russia is geographically the largest nation on Earth, yet its military resources, specifically its high-end air defense assets, are strictly finite. The general staff in Moscow now faces an impossible choice. Do they pull S-400 and Panzer air defense batteries away from the active front lines in Pokrovsk, Donetsk, and occupied Crimea to create a protective dome over distant rearguard strategic air bases like Engels 2, Olenya, and Savaslika? Or do they leave those air defenses at the front, leaving their irreplaceable strategic bombers, refinery towers, and weapons depots completely exposed to continuous Ukrainian deep strikes? If Moscow pulls air defenses to protect its rear, Ukrainian tactical aviation and HIMARS systems gain immediate freedom of maneuver along the contact line. If Moscow leaves air defenses at the front, Ukraine will continue to methodically dismantle the strategic infrastructure inside Russia piece by piece. This is the definition of operational dilemma, forcing your opponent into a choice where every available option leads to strategic disadvantage. Kremlin back-channel diplomacy and cognitive warfare operations cannot mask this reality. Neither North Korean artillery shells nor Iranian arms shipments can manufacture new strategic airframes or replace highly trained long-range bomber crews. Look at the stark asymmetry between these two strategies. Russia is striking civilian population centers and power grids in a desperate bid to inflict psychological pain and break Ukrainian resolve. But history and military science tell us that targeting civilians does not win wars of attrition. It only hardens resistance. Ukraine, on the other hand, is executing a cold, disciplined military campaign. Ukraine is not wasting long-range assets on symbolic targets. Ukraine is systematically striking Russia's actual physical capacity to wage war, its airfields, its ammunition storage, its radar nodes, and its energy production. In a long war of attrition, capacity matters more than pain. always. When an army loses its capacity to project power, its ability to dictate terms disappears. By destroying the one airbase Putin could least afford to lose, Ukraine has demonstrated that no point inside Western Russia is safe. No strategic asset is beyond reach. And the Russian war machine is consuming its own seed corn just to sustain its frontline posture. The world needs to stay focused on what is actually happening on this battlefield. Not the political noise, but the cold, hard realities of industrial attrition, air defense geometry, and strategic capability. Stay sharp, stay informed. We will be back with more updates as this campaign continues to develop.